What's up, people, and welcome to Developer Habits, a YouTube channel for software engineers interested in growth mindset, developer lifestyle, and technical tutorials. My name is Ketmar, I'm a full stack engineer from Estonia, and my goal is to inspire you to level up as a developer. Amongst other things, I tend to have conversations with other developers, and today I am interviewing Jack Herrington, a fellow YouTuber who's worked in big known companies like Macromedia, Walmart, and Nike. We're gonna talk about soft and technical topics, and I genuinely believe there's tons of great knowledge that you can use in order to level up as a developer. So without any further ado, let's jump to the conversation. Hi, Jack.
Hi, happy to be here. This is great, and thank you so much for doing this. This is it's wonderful, and it's great to be able to share with a different audience, and I think that's just great. So thank you.
Yeah, I actually told you off record before, but I think the first time I saw your YouTube channel was when you only had like 400 subscribers. It was the video about module federation.
Yeah.
Because I was looking into those more advanced front-end topics, and your channel pop up. So can you maybe tell us like about your YouTube channel? Like, why are you doing it, and what are the main topics there?
Sure, absolutely. So my channel is the Blue Collar Coder channel, and it just recently hit 10,000 subscribers, which is awesome. And yeah, we talk about advanced front end topics, things that I would run into at places like Nike and Walmart, where you're building large applications at scale. And the kind of YouTube videos I was seeing that were around those topics were usually presentations given at like local meetups or things like that. And sometimes, the information isn't condensed quite in a way where it's easily accessible in like small projects and things that we work through and have a story, or they're kind of embedded in huge videos, like you see nowadays, like a 3-hour videos. And I was like, it'd be good to have a channel that we just kind of looked at topics like micro front ends as an example, and really did them in a practical way where people would have some code at the end that they could look at and play with. And that's actually coming from my background. The way that I learned to code was actually through reading other people's code. So and I think that's still an incredibly valuable thing nowadays. I hope that when people watch the channel and watch these videos, that they actually go and try it out and actually download the project, see what it works, kind of push and poke at it a little bit. Hey, is this what I'm gonna need? Just play with it and learn through that, because I think that's a great way to go.
Yeah, already I have so many questions, but let's maybe talk about the code quality parts. You said you like reading codes. Do you also embrace like doing code reviews and encouraging others to do so?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It can be a little fraught sometimes. I mean, I know coding is kind of like writing, and people say that, it's hard to have your own work edited.
Yeah.
But after that kind of initial, I think there is like an initial sense of like, oh, don't criticize my stuff. But after a little while, I think you get in the mode of, it's just another set of eyes, another set of interests, and another set of viewpoints. And they look at your code and, it would be more readable or understandable or better structured if you were to try it this way. What do you think about that? And that's been super beneficial with me over my career. You just got to keep it positive and make sure that you don't want to go and just drill down on something and not let it go. If it's not mission critical, then everybody has a sense of style, and it's okay. Like, people can have different styles in how they write code.
I guess it also comes down to expectations in the team, right? Like the team has to agree on some kind of code requirements, and there must be some kind of freedom that people still can be more creative when they are writing codes.
Yeah. Hopefully a lot of that stuff is taken up by linting and your standardized tools, so that you're not debating tabs versus spaces all the time. And then it's just it's a way you got to go and build out that team dynamic so that each person, you kind of get a sense of, oh, I'm going to run this past this person because they know GraphQL really well, or they know, Redux or Sagas really well, or whatever, and get their take on it. And so, yeah, I definitely, for me, I will go and make sure that I actually put my code in front of the particular people that I think will give the best review and best benefit from it. So I consider it very, very positive, actually.
Yeah, but maybe if we are already talking about code quality, you are quite an experienced developer, and you have probably seen tons of different code bases. I mean, you worked in big companies. Do you maybe have some kind of universal tips that people could apply in their codes to make it like high quality and easy to maintain?
Always code for readability first. I think there's a Discord server that comes along with my channel, and we've got a lot of fun people on there doing lots of fun stuff. And last night we did night golf. So I threw up a problem and an example solution, and then we kind of golfed it. And golfing is where you go and take it and kind of make it the smallest possible solution. And it's not always the most readable. And so that's fun, and golfing is great. But when you're working on a team and you're building an actual product, then I always trade readability and maintainability for kind of terseness and coolness. But that's just a personal kind of preference.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. If we are not writing mission critical code that must really function really fast, I don't know, SpaceX rockets, for example, then I guess you can go for readability and make sure that whenever someone else comes in, or you in a few months, then you can still understand the code.
Yeah, and sometimes you're not really making a trade-off. You're just making a trade-off in like the actual text layout of the code, right? Adding spaces is not going to reduce performance, and the dot syntax, we do a lot of dot chaining nowadays, foo, dot, and then whatever comes out of that, dot bar, dot baz, all that sort of stuff. I mean, you are creating intermediary temporary variables there. JavaScript is just hiding those execution logistics from you. So, having it where you have it laid out readably, where you're, okay, we're going to grab that, we're going to turn that into its own variable and take it and go on to the next one, on the next one. If that's more readable, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. If that's more readable, you're not really actually paying any much more performance penalty for that. The compiler is already doing that for you.
Yeah. I mean, all the tooling that we use around writing our code, it makes our job so much easier. But actually, here we can shift the topic a bit. But let's maybe talk about learning the fundamentals. For example, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, actually, I was talking to somebody just recently and looking, and they were having me helping them out with some of their code, and they were missing a set of parentheses. They basically had, if this object, if this variable or an empty array, and the way that they'd structured it without the parentheses changed the interpretation order of that that set of code. And it's only because I had written a compiler in the way back that I kind of understood that you're going to go through tokenization, lexical analysis, and yada, yada, yada. And I actually kind of pointed to the guy, I said, when you have some time, just go and write yourself a little fourth compiler, or an interpreter. It's actually a fun little exercise, and it gives you some sense of that languages aren't magic. Computer languages aren't magic. There's only a certain set of valid operation and token sequences that can add up into an executable piece of code. And understanding those fundamentals is really valuable. So I'm actually a self-taught coder. I learned when I was 13, writing on my friend's Model 1 TRS-80, and it was only over the years that I read tons and tons and tons of code. And I also, I did the CS fundamental stuff that people were taking in college. I didn't go to college, but I was like, that's actually kind of important. So I did data structure. I learned data structures, learned algorithms, built a compiler, did a lot of that stuff because I was in, sort of C anyway, and it felt very natural. But it was a good underpinning, and it's helped me throughout my entire career. So even if you're just going to code school, and you had mentioned actually in the beginning about continuous learning, right? Those are things that you can do in continuous learning to keep your building on your skill set.
I actually agree with you. Like nowadays, we get even more and more self-taught developers, right? Because well, there's so much knowledge and courses, books out there. But I went to university and I learned the basics of how computers work, wrote Java and so on. But what really like made me love coding was still web development, because it was more accessible, it was more visual, more reactive, I would say. And now when I'm more experienced, I feel that, okay, this is now when I would like to know more about computers, how the code is compiled, not in the uni when it was just some kind of theory, but now when it has some practical value.
Yeah, exactly. You now understand why all of that stuff is so important, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually, so when I was at Nike, we did this really interesting outreach program. It was we would go into fourth grade classrooms and teach using what's called a microbit, which is a really small card about yay big that has some 5x5 paneled LEDs on it. And one of the first things that we did was have the kids make a name tag, and then they made a rock paper scissors game. And then they made a robotic pet at the end of it. It was hilarious, so much fun. Like they were starting to learn how to use like servos and stuff. And the reason that we went through art and that we made these practical projects is what's called constructivist learning. That's right. The idea is you first get into something and get exposed to something by learning how to make stuff that you can actually practically have, right? And then that once you get engaged with it and you start to build a mental framework of being able to do it, right? Then you start to understand, okay, well, maybe I should learn the fundamentals of why this works in the first place. A similar sort of thing. I'm a part-time woodworker, and it's a similar kind of thing in the shop. You don't like learn how to woodwork by like literally taking 2x4s and just sawing them all day and be like, okay, I now have my sawing credentials. I'm very good with the sawing skill. And then you move on to the next thing. It's like, no, you make stuff. It's like the first thing you make is like a toolbox. And like, okay, now I'm learning how to make things. I'm learning why, right angles are important and that kind of stuff. Right. So, that, and it's not, I think that practical element of things is really important to learn.
Yeah. It's to be honest, it's one of those things I hoped we get to talk about, because again, for example, beginner developers or people who just want to jump into development, you've probably seen those roadmap illustrations that are full of different paths. I don't know, become a front-end developer in 2021, for example. And there are tons of different technologies mentioned, like you start with JavaScript, React, Vue, I don't know, ESLint, and you go more in depth. And I mean, if I saw those kind of illustrations with so many different technologies, I would be frightened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but you just have to pick one thing, start playing around with it, and you get to see, oh, maybe I need to, I don't know, optimize my code. Maybe I need some kind of compilers, better compilers, whatnot.
Yeah, and I think if you start off with something that you can start making projects that are meaningful to you. Like the reason that I got into coding was I was building games for my friends. So I was building like Galaga clones, Space Invaders, Pac-Man, whatever. And it was great. The other students loved it. And it was the one thing that I was actually good at, right? I was getting F grades and everything else. But I could do this computer thing, and it was really great. And so it was it was a virtuous cycle, right? I would go and make something, and then they would get some feedback, and it made me feel good. So, do that. Like if you have an interest in music, right? Go make yourself a music page, right? It may be super simple, it may be rudimentary, but it's yours. And then you can start learning some skills, make it a better page, or go on to the next project, but do something that you feel excited and engaged about. And it's a project that's meaningful to you.
Yeah, that's a good tip, Because I guess, as you said, you build games. I started building websites not because I wanted to build websites, but because I wanted to share my knowledge out there with people. And yeah, just a little tip for other people that if you start developing, it can become hard at points, but if you have this motivation and the reason why you want to do it, then it's possible.
And another thing, kind of building on that, is having as a reason to teach, like, it actually helps you learn the topic even better. Right? And when you actually structure something out and you're like, okay, if I'm going to teach module federation as an example, like, how do I go and what do people ask me about this, and you go research that, and kind of structure out that knowledge, and it helps you understand it even better. So if there is something that you get excited about at work, it's like, oh, I learned Redux sagas or whatever, go and give a brown bag on it, and distribute that knowledge. It'll help people out, and they'll start asking you questions, and then maybe, and don't be afraid to be like, yeah, I don't know. I haven't tried that out yet. Let's go find out. And, and then, you learn more about it. And that's just a great way to learn. And that's actually, and again, one of the things we did with those fourth graders was we would actually, if we were doing multiple classes throughout the day, then we would have kids go from one class to the next and have kids teaching other kids. And that was really great. Really good experience for the kids who did that, and also the other kids, because I think there's a good connection there.
Yeah, I can definitely relate there, because I remember when I was freelancer before I became a professional, and I have been freelancing for many years, but it wasn't until I got to actually teach other people, other interns, and mentor some junior developers when I actually started to understand those topics in a deeper level, just because I had to explain them. And I really remember when there was one intern asking me, what exactly is a Webpack? And I was like, it bundles together your codes. And she went more in depth, like, okay, why do we need to do that? Okay, why can't we just include CSS to our file, and so on? And I had to come up with logical answers. So it's a great way. It's a great way to learn. But I'm gonna pick on this teaching topic a bit more.
Sure.
I was actually watching your module federation video today about A/B testing and how to make use of module federation.
Yeah.
And it seemed like your videos are really thorough and fluent. So my question is, how much time do you spend on creating videos like that?
Too much. No, it's fun. I really enjoy it. I would say I spend probably upwards of 3 or 4 hours at least building out just the code example and refining it into the smallest thing that is still a compelling story and hits the parts of it that I want to touch on, but really doesn't have much more than that. And then let's see. So the next part would be, I usually record out the screencast, which would be the coding sections, and I may actually do that 2 or 3 times to get it so that it's fairly clean. I used to do that and then do an overdub of that later on. I actually have a sound booth right over here that kind of make sure that you don't get a lot of echo and stuff. And but what I found was that I didn't have those extemporaneous thoughts in the moment that I did when I was actually kind of talking and I was coding at the same time, or I would pause and then say, oh, this is actually really important. Let's go highlight a couple pieces of code, show you how they're working together and all that. And I was missing out on that. So my newer approach has become more conventional. I do the talking and the screencasting together. And then oftentimes I'll go and do an intro and outro section, and they can be remote. So nowadays I'm shooting those outdoors in various parks. I live in Portland, Oregon. It's beautiful around here. So I'll go off to various parks. I did one, just my last video was in front of a waterfall, all kinds of great stuff, and show off the beauty of nature, kind of set up the whole thing, and then do the code section, snap that all together. Tax tag and title, I would say it's probably in the at least a day and a half of complete work spread out over a week. Sometimes though, I can do like multiple segments and stack them all up. Like I was doing an introduction to React series, which I think is now up to like 15 different videos. And it was nice because you could just kind of like roll on to the next one, and kind of factory process it out. But if it's a single one-off topic, then yeah, it probably takes a work day, at least work day and a half, to go and edit it all up and have it to the level that I like it. And that's unusual. I don't know. I think there are there are definitely videos out there that are just like, oh, I'm just going to go and screencast this and put it up on YouTube, not even edit it. And so there's a wide range of that.
Yeah. I mean, there are tons of creators and there are tons of consumers, and it's good to have different styles for different people, right?
Yeah. And it's definitely changed over the years. It is 2 years, but like it has changed, right? I'm not, there's parts of it that have become a little more lightweight. People are supposed to become more heavyweight. And I'm also doing this live streaming now, which is a hoot. It's great. It's so much fun to have folks kind of poke questions at me while I'm doing it, and do different takes and angles on it. And the only thing I just had to get over the sense of everything I'm going to do is going to work, right? Is going to be, perfect. And once you get over that, it's like, and you're fine. You're honest with your audience, and you say, well, hey, we're going to try this, and may work, may not. And if it doesn't work, maybe you can help me out on that. And then that's a lot more fun. And also this light back here that is on that Saturn V rocket is controllable by the audience. And so go and tweak that as we watch the live stream. So that's always fun.
That's really cool. Like regarding live coding, and why I initially asked this question was to understand if you are a more experienced developer, you're a principal developer, right? Yeah, and
that's what they say.
And sometimes I remember when I started out, I watched videos and I was like, oh my God, they write this successful code on the first try. How can they do that? But actually now you just confirmed my thought and understanding that it takes lots of time to build those coding related videos, and people usually spend tons of time doing multiple shoots and so on.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And compressing stuff. Like I mean, obviously doing like a yarn install, yarn or npm install, it's going to take, minute and a half. I'm going to cut that out. We don't need to go through that, right? We all know that that's going to work or whatever. But I've actually started sometimes leaving those mistakes in, because I think that is a thing, right? You don't want to seem like it's this ivory tower thing, or that just oh my God, I make crazy mistakes on the keyboard. I'm terrifyingly bad when it comes to code, typing. And people see it all the time. I'm like, I hit L instead of the semicolon and things. It's just a mess, right? And it's worse when I'm screencasting, because even though I know that I can throw it away, right, and that it's just bits, it's somehow very tense. I get very tense, and I'm not as fluid when I screencast as when I'm actually just kind of coding for myself for fun.
I guess I just wanted to say that it's actually good to see people like exploring different ways of coding, and even during live streams, it's great to see when different developers try out different ways of coding and they get stuck, and then you see how they actually solve those problems. And I'd argue that this is actually like the normal thing about developers, like exploring.
Yes, exactly. It's a good skill to learn. It means that you're not worried too much about failure. You have a good sense of, hey, it's like, I've got I can use Git like rock climbers use pitons, and they, okay, I can go and try this thing, and that works. Okay, put a piton in there, and then I try the next thing, and it doesn't work, and now I just fall back, on my previous Git release or Git version. Yeah, there's lots of cool stuff like that. There's something I was gonna riff on there for a second, but that's all right. Go for it.
What's the future with your YouTube channel, and what's the goal with it?
So that's an interesting question. I mean, it's sort of it's I used to have a really strong vision for where I wanted to go with it, and it was more a combination of like a travel blog and a tech show, and I had a particular like vision in mind. There's like a lightsaber shop that's in Oregon City, and I was like, oh, it'd be great to do like this thing where I go into the shop and watch them like build out a lightsaber, and then we go back to the office and build a lightsaber builder in like 3JS or something like that, or WebGL. And that's a thing that I want to do, but it's often tempered by what the audience comes back and wants, and so it as the audience has grown, it's become more of an audience-driven show, and the audience is like definitely geared towards that advanced front-end micro FE stuff. So it's interesting. It's like I do a little bit of that, and then I do a little bit of the other stuff as well. And but I still think, and there's some room for basics as well. Like I just did a thing on regexes recently because I think that people can be scared of those, and it's something that even more advanced developers just kind of, I'm not gonna do regexes, and it's like, what? Come on, once you get over them, they're not that bad. But going back actually to the exploration thing, I just did a video last week, just kind of on a whim. Very like took about an hour to produce, a little bit longer than it actually took to do. I was getting some Mediterranean food, and up on my phone, I'm like, watching like an article came in on the register that was like AWS released a new UI toolkit for React, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then the little like image in there was literally just like VS Code, and they're like, well, there's no documentation released for it, and it only had TypeScript bindings, and I was like, oh, that's actually kind of cool. That's like a detective story. I could actually go in and try out this. What is it like to build an app using a UI toolkit that's undocumented? And it was actually really fun because TypeScript was helping me out along the way. It was like, oh, there's you need this and you need that, and here's an app layout, and it was like you had to like figure out like, well, what's the there's obviously a button, but like what's a panel in this one and all that. And it was great, learning all of these things, and it was a fun experience. And the one thing I kind of regretted about it was I did it once just for myself, with all the mistakes and all the back, the places where I went, and then kind of, woo, that's not what I wanted. Back out. And then, and then I went into the stuff that actually worked, and then I re-recorded it with not as many mistakes.
I can imagine.
I did a little differently, but I wish I'd kind of like gotten that initial like just sleuthing around, like, oh, what is an app layout? Is that what I want? And it actually turned out to be a really cool UI framework, heavily opinionated. Sort of at the nowadays we've got like Tailwind and Chakra and that sort of stuff, which is basically do whatever you want. Like we'll make it easy on you. You want to add a little padding on top, PT or whatever. But this one was, we have a form, and it does all the responsive stuff for you. It does everything, and which is cool. Like I think that there is a place in the world for both of those viewpoints of like the heavily opinionated frameworks and the laissez-faire, do whatever you want kind of frameworks. And this was definitely more on the heavily opinionated side. But for your viewers, I mean, I think that's just a fun thing to do. Maybe sometimes don't even look at the documentation. Like maybe there is awesome documentation, but try and figure it out on your own. And things like TypeScript will help you do that.
Yeah, and here I'm just going to say that I actually saw that you posted this video. I didn't look at it, but I will now because I saw how excited you got.
Yeah,
but
it was a fun experience.
Yeah, but actually, like two questions, front-end development related questions that popped to my mind. Firstly, component libraries. Mm-hmm. Like this is a huge topic, right? And as you said, they can be really opinionated. They can be quite loose. But what's your advice, or what are the questions that people should ask before they, let's say, choose a component library or whether they want to build it themselves. Are there any tips and tricks you have in mind?
Yeah, so I guess, what kind of application am I building? Is it, an application that's going to have a very weird layout, or is it more like a kind of more mechanical layout, like a material UI kind of businessy, kind of boxy layout sort of thing? Do I have constraints around, like, do I need to support dark mode? Do I need to support theming? Are there specific components that I need? Do I need a carousel? Do I need a slider? Do I need, what are the specifics that I need in there? How good is it for responsive? I mean, nowadays they're pretty much all good responsive wise, but it's just a question of like, how easy is it for me to say, well, at this breakpoint do this, at this breakpoint do that. Layout tools, I would say, are really important. I mean, I always tend to go with grid first, and then if falling back on the Flexbox, and it's always nice to see how, how does the framework handle like the grid layout? Like, is it a grid tag, and then there's a grid item tag or whatever it is? All right, yeah. So all things like that. How well documented it is. I mean, I know I just talked about, like, avoiding the documentation, but if you're coding for a job, it's, you don't want to be sleuthing around. You want to be finding the right thing. I definitely, if I'm working at a company, I'm always encouraging them to put their money into, invest in their money and time into their unique value, right? And I don't often think that an atomic UI library that has, button and slider and the rest of it, if that's your unique value, it's not very unique. And I don't know how valuable it is. So spend your time on other things. Pick a library that works for you, that has the components that you like, that allows you to adjust the UI to the way that you want it, and then get on to what you really want to build with it, as quick as you possibly can.
Do you have any favorite ready-made component libraries that you prefer when you code?
Chakra is my current favorite on the React side of the house, Chakra UI. Although Tailwind macro, or a twin macro with Tailwind CSS, is kind of, I mean, you got to go and build the components yourself, but if you really want to be able to get that fine control over stuff, that can be a good way to do it. Material is very heavy. Like, there's just a big library. So I kind of look at that more for like enterprise apps, maybe back-end apps, things, dashboards, stuff like that. Yeah, what are your favorites?
I mean, I've actually been I just joined a new company, and we're making use of Beautify. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, Beautify is great. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just like it because it's different. I mean, most of the projects that I've been freelancing, for example, I make use of Material UI because it's just so universal.
Yeah.
But I find Beautify being stylistically, design-wise, a bit different and kind of fresh. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, Beautify is wonderful. It hasn't come out with a Vue 3 version though, right? And everything seems to be stalled. Like, I was actually just doing a video just recently on micro front ends with Vue. And so I was looking for and I wanted to do it on Vue 3. I didn't want to do it on Vue 2. And so I looked around for component libraries for Vue 3, and it didn't seem like there were any. Like, everything was like, oh, well, we'll have it in February, March, whatever.
Yeah.
But I want to do it today. So I ended up using Tailwind.
Yeah, Tailwind. Oh my God, I don't want to say it, but I haven't used Tailwind yet. I mean, I've seen their pitch where they just add more classes to their elements and the layout just changes. But yeah, I'm yet to try it out. I know it's this really powerful CSS tool that you can make use of.
It's a different take on CSS. It's a utility first framework, was what they call it. And so the idea is, instead of having a symbolic name like BTN in Bootstrap, BTN, what was it, warning or dash warn, that kind of thing, and basically having symbolic names that end up mapping onto sets of selector CSS attributes, right? Which I think is kind of what we all thought CSS was supposed to be, right? This is much more, a given class is going to have one and exactly one attribute change on it. So there's a bold, right? Or there's a strength 500 or whatever. And then you just kind of stack up those classes. And the downside is that if you don't do any optimization, that CSS is huge, right? Massive, because there's just so many combinations. But you can use something like Twin Macro as an example, and that actually puts Tailwind on top of styled components or whatever your CSS and JS framework is. And so when you stack all those up, it actually just creates one hashed out class. And then it's, so it's much more efficient, and it just kind of stacks all that up. And that way, if you've got multiple things that all use that same Tailwind specification, then they all inherit that one class, and much easier to use, much more efficient.
Really like when you explain some thoughts or technology here, I can see that you really thought this through, and you try to think about all these cons and pros, or pros and cons. So that's really nice. And this is why I'm going to ask you
Okay.
about front-end technologies nowadays. So we have the most popular ones: React.js, Angular, Vue.js, there's Svelte, there are tons of different frameworks people can make use of. What's your take on them?
My take is exactly what you were saying, in that everything has pros and cons. No framework is going to be out there that's big enough for you to see and talk about and make that list, right? That is a pile of junk, right? And so that's one of the things I try to emphasize on my channel so much is we live in we live a blessed life in having access to all of this great open source and all of these great libraries, and they're all wonderful, right? They all have their pros and cons, and some are good for some things and some are good for other things, but none of them are garbage. And it's one of the reasons why you won't find on my channel my putting up saying the NNN sucks, or NNN rocks, whatever, that kind of thing. It's like, I don't want to bash on open source. I think it's wonderful. I feel blessed that we have this and we have access to all this stuff. So let's talk about the good things. Let's talk about the pros. Let's talk about when each one is uniquely suited to a particular task, and what's cool about it. And then you can make the choice for yourself as to what works in your project. Like, for example, I think Svelte is it's very svelte. It makes for an incredibly lean code base. It's very easy to develop in. Does it, is what are the cons? I don't know. Actually, is it big for big teams? I don't know if we know that yet. But certainly, as a single developer, it's actually really great. It can create web components, all that sort of stuff. But it is a different take than some would say Angular. Angular is an extremely highly opinionated framework. And maybe that's a pro for you. Maybe that's the kind of thing that you want to have on your team, because you don't want people asking questions like, how do I structure a service? How do I make a backend call? You want the nature of the framework itself to have answered that question for you. And then when you do your PR review, you're like, wow, that fetch shouldn't be there. It should be over there, like, duh. So, and there's just different, there's different things, right? React is kind of cuts in the middle, right? In fact, I think the way that I pitched React at Walmart Labs was, it would be just a replacement for handlebars. We could still use the backend logic from, I can't remember I think it was Ember or something. I don't remember what was under the hood. Yeah. We could still use that, but we could use React as a replacement for just the templating. Turns out we didn't do that. We rewrote everything in Alt and Flux and yada, yada, yada. But, I think that you gotta look at the framework and pick the one that has that right specification of pros and cons. But, don't fall into the trap of saying, this is universally good or this is universally bad. I mean, if anything, recent history around, for example, React state management should show you that, like, I would say 5 years ago, if somebody walked into a room and said, global state is the devil, or state and components is the devil. Never use state in local state. And then everything moved up into Redux, these massive monster Redux stores that had way too much, state in it and all that. And then we turn around like, no, Redux is on the way out. Now we're going to do hooks, and now local state's cool again. And it's like, what changed? Nothing changed, right? It's you use the right tool for the right job. And now we've got like this weird place where like we don't really, Redux isn't what everybody wants to point to nowadays. But we do have some really cool like smaller microstate managers. And that's another thing I've actually been covering on the channels quite a bit, is these microstate managers like Valsio, Zustand, Jotai, Recoil, that have different viewpoints on how to store state, how to manage state, and it's really cool. In the view space, for example, you know, you could probably replace your Vuex store, which is has that kind of model. Even though I love Vuex, by the way, love Vuex, awesome, great. You know, that is the way that when I think about state, Vuex is it. MobX or Vuex, kind of the similar sort of thing. But that's basically built into Vue 3 now with reactive, right? And you can just go and take any pieces of state you want, right? You know, whether it's the user information, like who's logged in, what's, you know, how much is in their cart, whatever, or what their preferences are. And you can just build these little pieces of atomic statelet stuff that's shared with different components throughout the app very easily using this reactive stuff that's built in to Vue 3. So it's really cool. I don't know if that answered your question. Sorry.
No, it did, and it made me think about all the my own experiences, but also tons of different frameworks I have to now check out, or libraries. But you said a really nice sentence: "Use the right tool for your job." And what came out, my like eventual thought was that before you choose a new technology, like if you are working something on professionally, make sure you know what your end goal is with that job. And
definitely, very much so. Yeah, understand the constraints, right? What are the hard constraints that you must have? You know, do you need analytics support? Do you need I18N support? Do you need accessibility? Obviously, you always have accessibility, but you know, if you're going for a particular look and feel, like when you want to do glassmorphic, you know, or something like that, something exotic, you know, what is the level of theming you can get to, and then go and assess the different toolkits and see which one you can pull off the shelf. And, you know, hopefully you should always be able to pull one off the shelf, honestly. Again, I think it's, you know, try and skew as much as you can towards that. Like if it's, hey, if material is it, but they don't have the right carousel, cool. You know, use 95% material and then build your own carousel on top of the existing material tools. Don't like say, whoops, we're going to just, you know, throw out the whole thing and write a whole UI framework from scratch because it's missing that one component. We just really need that one component. You know, no. Come on, that's crazy. Don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's always you can always apply this 80-20 rule, right? And nowadays, I mean, I'm making use of Utify at the moment a lot, but I've already had those situations where I'm like, I don't quite like the behavior of that component, so I'm just going to extend it with my own functionality.
Sure, exactly. One thing I do wish we would come up with was a kind of universal sense of like what the naming of these things should be. Like, you know, obviously button, right, is a button. You know, but beyond that, like I was looking again at that AWS UI library, and they had something I think it was like called tiles or something like that. And I was kind of expecting like maybe like a masonry layout. You know, it turned out it was like radio buttons, and I'm like, radio buttons? Like where did that become tiles? So it would be nice to have like a common parlance that we would use across, you know, material and chakra, and it's starting to get there, but you know, it would be nice to actually get there. Like nowadays, everybody has box as a component, and that, you know, box allows you to go and, you know, handle padding and font sizing and that kind of stuff, and margins. You know, it'd be nice if that was kind of normalized so that like everybody was having box. But you know, that's just, maybe that's a me thing because I moved from framework to framework. If you don't move from framework to framework, if you just like, I just need button, then cool, like whatever. Use your framework and just enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, naming is one of the hardest things. I just have to put it out there.
It is.
We actually, in my previous company, during my last project, we were building a custom component library, and like we spent a week, like naming different components, making sure that everyone's on the same page, documenting those names, and like reasoning why these are the names and why these components are in the folders that they are in. And like it's like the coding part was easier because there were so many fierce discussions around naming. So it's
yeah, when I was at Nike, we actually did a survey. The design team was looking to go and build their design language, right? And they actually brought in a consultancy to walk through each one of the pages, literally like kind of Sharpie out the different sections. And there was, in naming these things was like the #1 thing. And I'm like, wow, people are getting paid a lot of money to help us deal with names, like, what do you want to call that? I would call that a carousel, but no, let's call it a slider. I don't know, whatever. Yeah. Who cares? I mean, of course, that totally invalidates what I had just said about normalizing what we say. But so why did, if you mind my asking, like, why did you decide to build your own component library? Okay, enough said.
I guess like, obviously the company wasn't as big as Nike, but we were a big company, and having that really strong brand and design language was important to us. And like, if you are a bigger company and you have the resources to do that, I mean, I was happy. I was really happy because I was like, okay, a new challenge. I want to do it. And as a former graphic designer, it was just something that really excited me. I'm not like entirely convinced if it was necessary, but I'm happy I got to experience it.
Yeah. Boy, I'll tell you, it's interesting. There's like what do they call it? The half mile, the last mile problem when it comes to these component frameworks at big companies like that, which is, it's great. You can go and make, a component library. And believe me, I've seen companies have multiples of them over time, right? Even in the same technology stack. One group of developers over here is like so happy with the component set that they built for their app that they're like, everybody should use this. And then another one's over there, they don't even know each other, and they're like, everybody should use this. But how do you, there's a void in there of tools that allow you to say, over the whole code base, is anybody using my button? Is anybody using, this carousel that I just came up with? And it's not something that we have access to yet. I think there's a big like potential product void in there for people who are at bigger companies who want to know, like, hey, we invested all this money in building these components. Is anybody actually using them? And there's no quick way to get that answer.
Yeah, like metrics for component usage, basically.
Right. Yeah, I had one person basically pitch to me that we should essentially use like Google Analytics. Like if you put a carousel on a page, just fire an event that, hey, I'm here, and then you could go and just kind of see from the URLs. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy. We should be able to just we shouldn't be penalizing ourselves at runtime to go and get biographic information about who's using what. We should be able to look over the entire code base with Git or, Bitbucket or whatever you're using, and go and then kind of connect up stuff and say, oh, hey, by the way, if you mess up the API on button, like if you go and change, I don't know, on click to whatever, on something else, on press, I guess, then, or on tapping, whatever. These are the people that you're going to mess up, right? Yeah. And that's one thing. Another thing that is a problem when it comes to these component bases is you get to a certain point where everybody's using it and you don't want to break it, and so that's a worry too. And would be really nice to be able to know, like, okay, who's using it and how are they using it? What properties are they sending to it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, I hope you agree with me when I say that, like, building those libraries, the fun parts, but after that, the maintenance, it's really hard. And in our previous company, like I was leading the project for a public component library that was used in our marketing related products. But then we had like our web app or like the product component library. And obviously the product component library was used by the whole company to develop different kind of functionalities. And there were many iterations, I think four iterations of the same component library, just because there were new technologies coming out. There were like breaking feature changes, requests, and so on. So it's like if you build a component library, you actually need to maintain it and make sure that the company can use it properly.
There's so much important learning around component libraries. You got to educate around it. You've got to build a community around it. I actually saw this really well done at Nike. There's a back-end team that was in the content management space. They're the ones that would like actually like say, okay, so they would give the interface that a product person could then type in the copy about a shoe and all that. And they built all of their stuff on top of Material. And then they had specific Nike specific skins and Nike specific components for themselves. But every week they would bring in leads from the different teams and talk about like how it was being used and get feedback on it. And so they created this kind of, virtuous community cycle around it, encourage people to submit to it, to PR to it and change it. And that's just really important. I mean, if you're going to spend the time and the money to build something, then make sure that you have a maintenance plan going forward so that it doesn't just die on the vine. Mm-hmm. And that's really, really critical. And it's sometimes it can be more about these kind of soft skills of doing community outreach, of getting feedback, of maybe doing like a newsletter, I don't know, every week, here, look at this cool thing that we did with it or whatever. Be creative and get people excited about it. But it's a lot of work. I would say definitely as a company grows, you should have a team that's full-time job is to manage that platform.
Yeah, I like truly agree with that. And in the end, as we spoke before, you need to have an end goal, like the reason why you are doing it in the first place.
Right. The reason why you're doing, and I think that was actually the good approach that team did was they took the best parts of Material and said, we're going to build on top of that. We're not just going to go and start from absolute scratch. We're not going to go and say, well, I don't know, let's rethink 12 column layout, whatever. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. I'm feeling ashamed again.
Oh.
But we had to come. I mean, we came up with our own grid system, but we used bootstraps as the basis, and basically, yeah.
Thank you. Because then you can at least point to Stack Overflow. You can say, okay, this is how it's done. You can point somewhere. If you got to write all the documentation from scratch for yourself, you're creating a huge job.
Yeah, it is. But hey, I'm gonna shift the topic a bit again, and I wanted to talk about design in design and the importance of it for front-end developers. How much do you think front-end devs should know about design basics, maybe? And yeah, what's your take on that?
I am a huge fan of Edward Tufte. I don't know if you ever heard of Edward Tufte. Oh wow. You get to have an experience. This is great. So he is a lecturer and a person that writes about data visualization and the importance of data visualization, takes it incredibly seriously. He's written now 4 books. The most recent one is just fantastic. And he talks about the importance of design is honestly a life-saving way. So 2 of the most important examples he gives are around Napoleon's march into Moscow and into Russia and back. And there's a great graphic that shows a line that starts off really thick, and that's the size of Napoleon's army, and it gets thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner as it goes out to Russia, and then it gets really, really, really thin as it comes back. And it was an anti-war poster. It basically said, this is the cost. This is the cost of war. Oh, and wow. Yeah, it's viscerally like, boom, okay, wow. And another one that he did was around the Challenger disaster, where they had Morton Thiokol had a 3x5 card. Sorry, Morton Thiokol had a 3x5 card on it that had all of the information that you'd ever need to know not to launch a solid rocket booster below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, or I can't remember, something like that. But the information was so poorly presented that it just got ignored. And maybe that's an oversimplification of the story, but it shows the importance of being able to tell a story, being able to, in a way where you understand the viewer's point of view, what they're trying to get from it, what should be prioritized. And I think that's really, important for, even from a developer standpoint, to understand, because that then helps you make decisions about, what's going to be the first things that we're going to put on the screen, what's going to be, what's the most critical output of all this. And it gets you to understand things from a customer's perspective, right? That's been the kind of thread throughout my entire career since when I was 13 years old, making video games for my friends. I always wanted to get feedback from them. I was always, asking questions, and everything was from the customer's perspective. And it's always been that through my entire career. Like, how are people going to use this? Thinking not about myself and what I want to put on the screen and what's important to me, but what's important to them and how they're understanding it. So reading books like Tufties allows you to go and understand how to use design as a way to communicate things more effectively. And it's honestly fascinating. Like, it's just another skill to have that helps you as a developer, I would say. Yeah. So, anyway, that's my spiel about design.
That's a great answer. And seems like I got a new book to read. Maybe make a video about 4. Yeah. We are going to run out of time slowly, but there's one question that I still want to ask from you.
Sure.
What do you think the future holds for front-end development, and what are the things you're most excited about?
That's a good question.
Let's say 5 years.
That's wow, that's tough. It's really hard to think that way, because I actually think web is going to last longer than we think it is. I think that there is a great deal of value in native, so I would definitely look at, kind of React Native or Flutter or one of those, kind of, are there ways that we can cross devices really easily and reuse those skills? I know tactically, I just put out a 2021 like tech trends kind of video. I think TypeScript, and this is much more short term, but if you're a JavaScript developer now, I would strongly recommend that you learn TypeScript in 2021. I think the jobs that say that TypeScript is a nice to have are going to say that TypeScript is a must have by 2022. I think WASM, WebAssembly, is something that I kind of took as a joke, back in the day. It's like, wait, assembly and a web page? What are we talking? What are you doing? I don't even understand this. I mean, as a C++ programmer, I was like, why would we do this? But I think that there's some value there. If not only that you have another thread on the client that you can use to do more processing and be more efficient about it, but also, as Microsoft's Blazor framework has shown, they're doing some really cool stuff on WebAssembly as essentially a replacement on the client side for like a Vue framework, right? They've actually gone and built all the shim layer that allows you to manipulate the DOM. So, there's cool stuff. I don't know, 5 years out. Wow, that is a long time horizon for something that changes so rapidly. Maybe Deno will take over. I don't know. Maybe we're all going to be doing ESM, probably. It's I would say probably definitely a trend towards microsite architecture, though. I get the feeling that like people want to be able to rapidly deploy pieces of a site and that kind of functionality more quickly. So I would definitely see micro front ends, we saw the microservices revolution, then we saw the microsite revolution, and now we're seeing the micro front end revolution. So being able to take code and get more reuse out of it, use it in more locations, keep it up to date. So a lot of good trends in that space.
And especially regarding microservices, front-end microservices, if you want to learn more about it, then in your channel there are great videos about it.
Yeah, I'm going to start doing a series on GraphQL coming up, and part of the emphasis there will be on looking at GraphQL as an aggregation layer. So, which is what a lot of companies do when they've got these massive microsite architectures, where you don't really want the client making 15 different calls to 15 different microservices. You want to run that through one GraphQL and have it all sequenced out. So things like that. Yeah, that'll be exciting. I'm looking forward to making that series.
It's I only asked about let's say web development and more focus on front end, but as I understand, you are a full stack developer actually, and there's also the back end sides and database management and so all the other things not related to front ends. How do you keep yourself up to date with all the knowledge? I understand you try out different technologies and so on. What's your way to keep yourself up to date?
So I have got my own set of feedly feeds. RSS is still a thing, and there's a lot of great stuff coming out on RSS feeds from Medium, from Dev2, from Redis, Reddit, sorry, and all of that. And so having a good set of RSS feeds is great. I'll tell you what, though, having created this Discord server has been really handy, because people come to me and ask me about, hey, well, have you thought about this? Have you looked at, MobX state tree? Have you looked? And I'm like, what? I don't know. Sure. Yeah, man, I'll take a look at that. And so, you kind of, after a while, people start, coming to you with stuff, which is super handy. And then it's a question of how fast can you find the value in it? Can you construct a story around it? Can you build a video around it? Get it out there? And then in my case, actually, I've just started now writing articles that go along with every video, and that even adds sort of more time. But if I was to give advice to YouTubers, it would be that was something I neglected in the beginning, was the multimedia aspect of it, making sure that you're not just getting the video out there, you're getting ancillary material out there as well to kind of point to that video, like the articles and stuff. And definitely do that as well. So it's a lot of time. I mean, do you find that your YouTubing takes up a lot of time?
Yeah, I mean, man, I thought it's gonna be so much easier, much easier.
Yeah,
but it's again, you need to have a reason, right? And we both, as we mentioned before, we both learn while we are doing those things. And even now, when I'm talking to you, I mean, there are already so many different things I want to check out now, different frameworks, books, and so on. So in the end, it all comes down to learning and improving.
You're continuous learning, right? And that when you said that up front, I was like, yep, that's exactly it. And that's one of the things that was really handy to me when I was growing up and starting out my career was, what I would not meet programmers who just coded, right? It was very rare that I would find engineers who just coded. It would, this person was a PhD and they were doing neuroscience, but they were also coding, or this person was like a writer, or, and they were also coding. And so it helped me normalize being a multifaceted person. It's okay to like design. It's okay to be a photographer and also code. Coding doesn't have to be the only thing that you do. Coding can be an aspect of things that I was talking to folks, and it's I look at it kind of like cooking, right? Sometimes I cook, sometimes I don't cook, right? But sometimes I code, and it's just a skill, and you can cook all the time and be a chef, or you can code all the time and be a coder, or you can code a little bit and use it to, I don't know, automate your garage door, or change the light in your office, right? Whatever it is, but don't it's just another skill, and you should be a multifaceted person where you kind of think of all those skills kind of adding together to make a really good skill set, and be a human, a multifaceted person.
Yeah, I totally agree. And here I'm actually going to recommend to all the listeners that there's this book called Atomic Habits, which I made a video about. But it introduced me to this idea that um, if I want to train a new habit, then I should ask who is the person that kind of has those kind of habits.
Hmm.
And for example, if I want to run a marathon, I should start with who is a person that runs a marathon, someone who goes jogging, someone who eats healthy, and so on, and so on. And I made myself a list of things that I do, I don't know, related to coding. And I saw that, okay, for example, YouTubing, I do it as a developer, but I also do it as an entrepreneur, as an educated person, as a person who wants to improve constantly, and so on. So there are like those different personas connected to my activities. And that, I guess, resonates with your idea of being a doing many things and trying out different skills.
Definitely. I would say, what is a YouTuber is a person who understands how to construct a story, right? So when I watch a Pixar movie nowadays, and by the way, like an example would be Soul, and if you haven't seen Soul, you should go see it or watch it. It's an amazing film.
Not yet, but
Oh, it's great, and it actually emphasizes what you're talking about. Anyway, uh, you kind of look at things differently. You're like, how are they constructing this story? Because like that's an aspect of YouTubing. It's like you have to give people a mental framework to put this knowledge into. Otherwise, you're just kind of spouting knowledge at them. You're like, you got to tell them first. This is why you're learning this. This is why this is why it's important to you. And if it's not important to you, feel free to go on to the next video. But if this is interesting, this is how you should take that knowledge and kind of drop it on your knowledge tree, right? And that's one aspect of it. Another aspect is like uh, audio. Like how do you record good audio? How do you record good video? And so I actually end up watching a lot of stuff from a company called Moment. They go and do like cool like travel vlogging stuff. I can't even imagine that they would look at me and say, well, wow, that's a guy who would use our, care about videography. But no, I really do. I want people to look past the quality of the video and the quality of the sound and right into the content. And in order to do that, you have to create a transparency where it's like, it's good enough where, we all watch TV or all watch shows, binge shows and things like that. And you can tell when it's fakey and it's, and then you get
yeah.
hung up. You get hung up on like, oh, wow, that doesn't look good. Right. Well, okay. Well, let's get the quality up to the point where people aren't like obsessing about the quality. They're just thinking about the content.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, learning all those skills, being a multifaceted person, it's all good. It's all good.
There are like, yeah, I just saw that this interview has been going on quite a while, but there are still so many topics I'd like to talk about. So maybe at some point we can do a follow-up. But
Sure.
before I'm gonna say the final goodbye, I'd like to ask you, what is one habit that makes you a better developer?
A habit. I'm gonna go so pedestrian and say for me it's unit testing.
Ooh.
Sorry, but it seems so silly, but at the same time, I use this VS Code extension called Wallaby, and it basically runs your unit tests as you type,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost thrilling how I can actually code and code and code and code and code and be writing tests at the same time, and I'll have all these literally unsaved files, but I know the tests all run and pass at 100%, and I'll save all the files, and then just for giggles I'll run yarn test, and yep, 100% unit test coverage, and you're like, that's just
And there is that great feeling, right?
Oh, it's wonderful, right? Because you're like, I built this. It's like I built this engine, and everything's gonna rest on this engine, and that engine is solid like a rock. I can depend on it, and that's a great feeling. And I just having done this for X number of years, right? Nothing feels worse than walking out on a gangplank of bad code and being like, "Ooh, I don't know, man. This, who knows what's going on back there, right?" we all kind of assume that, the OS is stable and reliable, and the languages are stable and reliable. You should endeavor to make sure that, as you build up your application, like each level of it is just rock solid and dependable.
Yeah, that's again a topic I'd like to talk about. So,
oh my gosh,
so much more in depth, but yeah, Jack, I don't know, I'm speechless. Like it's been really, really fun to talk to you and pick your brain on different topics.
Thank you, and it's been great. Thank you so much. The questions have been wonderful, and I can't wait to read the comments and see, people are like, "Who's this guy? What are you talking about?" Crazy guy.
But thanks, man. Oh, but yeah, guys, if you like those topics, what we spoke about, if you want to learn more about front-end technologies, but not only front-end, right? You mainly focus on front-end, but definitely check out Jack's channel. I'm gonna put a link in the description of this video below. And yeah, do you have anything to say, Jack?
Thank you. Keep learning. Keep watching this guy. He's doing great stuff. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. See you in the next video.